Okay, good day, everyone. Thank you for coming and attending a presentation in the Jim Bregman Invites You To series. I'm Rob Riley, and working behind the scenes with me is Pete Mantell from Virginia. Thanks to Pete. Uh, and now I'd like to introduce the host, Jim Bregman, the USA's first Olympic medalist in judo, a bronze medal, and a world bronze medalist in judo, and several times the president of the USJA, a 10th degree black belt. So here now is Sensei Bregman.
Well, thank you, Rob. We're very privileged today to have an in-depth explanation of kata and its refereeing activity given by Lisa Capriotta and Rob Gouthro. And we will be joined by Brad Bolen also. And with that, I will turn it over to Lisa to explain in detail what she'll be covering.
Yeah. So I'll start with our background. So Rob and I have been doing judo for almost 20 years now. We predominantly learned kata in the DC area with Diane Jackson and Kurt Tamai and Karen Weldon, and we're just in a kind of a nice little hotspot for kata for a little while. So and they also provide us with a lot of feedback and support and resources. So we felt pretty comfortable kind of busting out on our own. So Rob and I traveled a lot because I was in the Navy. And we settled in South Carolina, partially because there wasn't any judo here, and we knew that if we started someplace new and open, that we could maybe make a little bit more of a difference for the community. So you can see our first dojo behind us. We're in the process of building a second one that should probably open post-COVID, so maybe March if we're very lucky. In that time of trying to build judo in South Carolina, we've continued to really promote kata as a way of training for shiai, a way of competing if you're not interested in competing in shiai, staying in shape, and also learning some of the more traditional elements of judo and Japanese tradition.
Yeah, totally. And, just clarifying, when we say there wasn't any judo here, we mean comparatively speaking, compared to Miami or Los Angeles or Washington, D.C. area, Shufudan Chikai. There were a couple of good clubs in the area, but, it's not like those areas where there's that density. So we are really interested in spreading judo. We're judo missionaries. We really believe in what judo does for people, what it does for kids, what it does for older individuals, for veterans. We believe that 100%. And so we were really interested in going to a place where we could take a place that had a couple clubs and then just get into that mix and bring it more to a community that really didn't know what judo was. So that's how we ended up in South Carolina. We did about 10 years of karate before we came to judo. And, then karate and some of the other martial arts, kata, is something that's an integral part of the art. And so there's kata competitions. You go to any competition and there's a kata and there's the weapons and there's the kumite or the sparring, and it's all considered about equal. So when we moved into the world of judo, it was just natural to us. Oh, of course we'll do kata because that's just part of martial arts. And then later we discovered that kata was not nearly as integral in judo, or was not as integral anymore as it had been. And certainly not vis-a-vis other martial arts. And so that was one way we kind of ended up in judo kata. Brad, you want to jump in and talk about yourself for a minute?
Yeah, so I've basically been doing grappling and judo and jiu-jitsu things for my entire life. I started doing judo. Actually, I went and trained because I lived in Fort Bragg also. So I actually, I heard somebody say they were from Fort Bragg. I was like, oh yeah, I'm coming back. And then I just always was going to a dojo after that. So I moved to Illinois. I started going to the Cohens. Obviously, Steve and Erwin Cohen. So I trained there, and I just progressed naturally into wanting to go to more competitions and competing in the sport more. So then I eventually moved up to the Jason Morris Judo Center in upstate New York to try and make it to the Olympics, and I just fell short in 2012. But along the way, I won Pan Ams. I was a 6-time national champion. And now I'm transitioning to instructing more and coming down here working with Rob and Lisa to do that.
Well, that's wonderful. You all three have wonderful backgrounds. I was very interested in a comment that was made that kata is not an integral part, or not as much of an integral part of judo today as it had been. I had the fortune of growing up in the Washington Judo Club, kata religiously, because it was considered simply part of the entire judo experience. And what we found, and I think I can speak for Edwin also, is that practicing kata actually enhanced our competitive capability. And when we performed the kata, we did it in many different ways, and at sometimes we would speed it up to be more like a stegeko type activity. So I was interested, what has happened from the early days when I was 12 years old and started doing judo? There was a middle period apparently where kata and shiai sort of separated, I'm wondering, and then you're bringing it back together. So if you could maybe speak a little bit to that, I'd really appreciate learning about that.
That's a really wonderful point. So I was training, so I do shiai, I compete shiai, I'm competitive in shiai as well. I won the 2016 World Veterans Championships in 57 weight class. So I try to be as good a competitor as I can be, even though, you know, it's a very difficult, it's very difficult to be competitive in that field. There's so many people who are trying really hard. And for me, I was never as competitive as a shiai player until after I had pursued the kata. So like almost all judoka, I started competing in shiai, and I practiced kata on the side. Rob and I were definitely doing very well in kata, and so we put a lot of emphasis on that, and we practiced the shiai in the background. And it was such a large role in improving our technical capability that I attributed my world championship in 2016 predominantly to practicing kata, just because it forced me to do it technically correct and not try to, you know, just muscle people around. So I think there's a lot of truth to what you say, Jim. And that's really why we'd like to bring them back together. This concept of, especially with the randori no kata, nage no kata, and kame no kata, these are just ways of training shiai with another partner. You know, something that's already prescribed, so it's giving you some good foundation. And once you have a strong foundation, then you can become more creative with it out in the shiai world.
Yeah, you know, and I didn't live through those shifts. You know, we've been in judo for a while, but a lot of what you asked about happened before we were on the scene. So I don't want to speak to that too much because I wasn't there to go through it. But I think if you just observe what kata is as an element of judo or as a part of martial arts, and you compare it to sports science and what sports science is now, I think there's this understanding or misunderstanding about kata. If you look at it, there's a ceremonial aspect to kata, and there's almost a ritualistic aspect to it that's very deeply tied to Eastern culture and the way that ritual and repetition and form are all a part of, you know, Eastern aesthetic and Eastern values in a way that they're not in the West. And so the bowing and the patterns and some of the formalistic elements, those aren't on their face of it sport, so to speak. And so when judo began to be viewed primarily as a sport, instead of as a martial art, I can see why some people would say, well, those things are extraneous to the sport aspect of judo. And so we need to focus just on what is sport, and we'll do these drills this way, and that's old fashioned, and we can discard it. Well, if we're taking judo down to just being a sport, if judo is just wrestling with the jacket on, then maybe that was an efficient way to go about it. But there are things in judo and in martial arts that are more than sport. And I think that kata has some of those things. We're very blessed that we've got a high-level competitor here. And so I'll throw, Brad, the question to you. From your perspective as an athlete coming up, aiming for the Olympics and missing it by a hair, talk about it from your perspective where kata and judo as a whole fit in.
I actually liked what Jim said about he would start doing kata and speeding it up, because I think kata is also a really good way just to start introducing movement for throws in judo, because that's kind of the hard part for a lot of people, is like maybe they can do the throw standing still, but just beginning the groundwork for doing a throw while moving. And then, okay, now do it a little bit faster. All right, now do it with another rotation, or come do it from a different angle. Kata definitely would be useful to start that groundwork. Like, all right, here's how you move and set up these attacks instead of just doing them statically.
Yeah,
this is a pretty good tie-in for what we'd like to cover today. So we're gonna do some portion of Katame no Kata for you, and then we're gonna maybe talk a little bit about some of the elements of how to get into kata. But we chose Katame for this demonstration because the practice of what we're going to do directly feeds into randori and directly feeds into shiai. And it's a great way to teach young judoka how to not just try one thing and it doesn't work and I'm not escaping, so I give up. And this is what happens when you're young. But I know bridge and roll, and it's not working. Oh, I'm done. But bridge and roll just provides you with an opening that maybe you slip out the back door. And that's what you get. That's one of the best take homes for the shiai competitor that they can get from practicing Katame no Kata or any of the kata.
Excellent. Well, for me, judo is a martial art, and it always will be. And kata and shiai in my training and education and upbringing are integral part of the whole martial art. So I look forward to your presentation.
Okay,
Thank you.
great. All right, so let's call that the end of the introduction then. So we know that looking at the guest list right now, we have some very experienced kata people who have signed on for tonight's session. Some people also who have taught us a lot along the way. But when we're speaking here, we're speaking not just to the group that's present, but also to the mind that this might be recorded and viewed by others afterwards who are interested in learning more about kata, who might not know much about it, and who are looking to understand what it's all about and how to get into it. So we're going to address both audiences in the course of our remarks. So I guess we'll start by talking about what kata is competitively, because we do kata competitively, how it's scored, what it's judged, what a journey is like to become a competitive kata player. And then we'll talk about training techniques for kata and a progression of training techniques that you should do as a beginning or intermediate kata practitioner that's looking to move ahead to the next level, and how that fits together. And all that ties back into, at its root, get better at judo. Do kata not as something separate, but to get better at your judo and better at the sport of judo. And if you're doing kata with an eye towards that, you will automatically progress in that. Yeah.
Excellent.
So we'll jump up and we're going to do a little tiny bit of Katame no Kata right now. And then we'll come back and we'll talk about kata, but we've had a lot of talking right now. So let's show what Katame no Kata looks like. We're going to do just the first set of Katame no Kata.
And we're going to slow it down for this. This is going to be a little bit more deliberate than we would when we're competing. Just to keep an eye on that because we're hoping to be able to use this a little bit as a training tool. That being said, Rob and I do have a kata series that we'd really like to take this pandemic as an opportunity instead of as a shutting us all down. Yeah. Instead of a detriment, we want to use it as an opportunity. So we're going to be doing some dual format, both in the dojo or in person and through Zoom kata seminars, basically one a month. The first one is going to be February 7th, and you'll see more information about that as we get it on everybody's calendars. But yeah, without further ado, let's do a little Katame no Kata.
Okay, great.
we're gonna shortchange
Yes.
our bowing in because we don't have the space. Excellent.
An improvised ending there because that's the middle of the kata. But okay, so let's talk about that for a second. So obviously kata is judo because we did a lot of judo techniques, but there's a lot of things we did that you don't see in a shiai match, except you do. So, we bowed at the beginning, bow at the end. There's some ritualistic or some formal aspects. There's some symmetry that's built into it. So you do that in a prescribed fashion. Tori and Uke, so Tori is doing the techniques. Uke is going to do a prescribed set of responses, and you get judged and scored in competition. So it's kind of cool. It's fun. I'm smiling because it's enjoyable. And so what do you get out of that? So because what you get out of that, if you understand what you're getting out of that, you're going to train better, and then you'll do better for competition. So what do you get out of that?
So probably the biggest overall thing that I get out of that style of judo competition is the concept of courageousness. And that's supposed to be one of our ethics in judo. That's very important. It takes a lot of courage to stand up, you, one person against one other person. Everyone's watching you. There's an element of that in shiai, but then your brain clicks over because you're in that fight or flight mentality. In kata, you notice, and in the back of your mind, you've got everyone staring at me the whole time. We've been at competitions where 1 year at Pan Am's, the other 3 mats had finished. And so everyone in all of North and South America, all the teams, they were all watching Rob and I. And it's you get an opportunity to turn around, fix your belt, and realize you guys are the only ones, and a couple hundred people are watching you. And so that really forces your brain to operate professionally and technically at a high level of stress. And that's very good, because the next time you walk out to a shiai match, you're thinking like, yeah, like 4 or 5 people are watching me. 1 referee. I just had 5 judges, So I get a lot of that, getting over the fear of competing from practicing kata.
Yeah, so that's good. One thing. Another thing that differentiates this from randori or shiai, which are the other 2 pillars of the stool that is judo, is that unlike in those things, in randori, I can do a poor or a mediocre technique and still be successful on that technique as long as I was better or more skilled in that moment than was my competitor. And in a kata, I can get out there and I can do a poor or mediocre technique, and all it is a poor or mediocre technique. I'm not going to maybe win anything or score the points that I want with that technique. I maybe at the end of the day will win a medal because maybe my competitors were worse at that kata than me that day. But in that moment, you understand that it was not a correct technique, or maybe later you look back on it and understand it was not a correct technique. And you have to do the techniques in a prescribed fashion. So I'm going to do this, then this, then this, and I have to do it correctly. And in the Nage no kata, I have to do techniques that might be my favorite techniques, and I have to do techniques that I maybe hate, and I have to do them on the left side, and I have to do them on the right side. So from a training perspective, I think that's really important for your overall development and growth as a judoka. For children, I think there's a strong benefit for that. Now, Mickey, you asked a question in the chat, which was, why does everybody do the same techniques in competition? And, that relates to what we're talking about, so I'll address that right now. In the handbook for the rules, in the Kata, the Kodokan handbook, it says you'll do techniques such as this, for example, for example, for example. And then there's a video that shows an example set of techniques. And by and large, most of the competitors at the national level and all of the competitors at the world level will do that set of techniques. And why? I guess the real answer is because, one, it's a really good set of techniques. It's maybe not the best or the only solution to it. I know some people disagree, but I think in general, it has what the Tatame no Kata is meant to show, which is a logical set of techniques. They're connected. So in general, in the first I attack their grip on me, and then I try a shrimping and I try to come under them and they move in the right way and I bridge and roll. That's a pretty good way to approach it. it does not prescribe that you have to do those techniques. And so if anybody wants to be really courageous and get out there and do their own thing, you're welcome to. But there is a pressure to standardize at the highest levels. Part of that is what we're going to talk about next. And that's because the judges have to understand in competition whether your technique was good or not, whether it was successful or not. And the judges are very trained to judge this performance of this routine. And they see the errors, the mistakes, and how the different things might connect in that routine. When you do your own, they have to make that evaluation on the fly under quite a lot of pressure. And so I think you get a lot more bias against your technique because the judges themselves are not confident in their scoring. And so that's one difference maybe where kata for competition versus for promotion versus just for general practice might be different, because for general practice, you would do your own techniques that you needed to be training on.
Right now, for the state of kata, not just in the U.S. but nationally, internationally, having a prescribed set of techniques is very helpful for those who are learning kata as a training tool. If you're, you have 2 orange belt young adults and you teach them your standard set, and they don't have the opportunity to be creative at the beginning, they're learning the building blocks. And then you can say to them by the time they're need-ons, hey, okay, you can compete in this and you can switch it up, start to change things a little bit. You can maybe do a demonstration. Rob and I used to go to elementary schools, and we'd like to do that again if COVID ever, if the pandemic ever allows for this. And we at that point, we could develop our own series, but it was because we had started with a basic set of maneuvers, and then we could what's the word I'm looking for? We could improvise on top of that set, whether it's my set, IJF set, your individual sensei's set for training at the lower levels, so that your students have kind of an idea. With the unfortunate, like kind of low level of emphasis on kata right now, it's beneficial to have kind of one national set, because a lot of people's instructors and coaches don't have enough experience in kata these days. So it's nice to be able to teach one thing to people so that, Rob and I can develop it as instructors as well. But I see in the future, Mickey, that once we've kind of reestablished kata as a great training tool, I see Katame no Kata becoming more creative and opening up to a lot of different action reaction sets.
Sequences, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, that's a few thoughts on that. So what we just performed was a kata. And so there were some elements of ceremony, some elements of ritual. There was some sport and martial arts techniques that took place. And so what does this mean in competition? Because maybe not everybody watching this understands that you can do that routine and get graded on it. Just like you would maybe, for example, people do this all the time. You go out and you get graded on ski jumping, and they go down the sport and they do a set technique and they flip through the air, twirly, twirly, twirly. They land either brilliantly to the delight of the crowd, or they crash spectacularly to the delight of the crowd, either way. Or, 10, 10, 10, 10, and 8, because that was the Russian judge. So it's the same thing here with the judo katas. And you'll get scored by a panel of judges. And we teach this, and one of the things that people often ask us is, okay, so I go to the competition and I always get 5s and 6s and I'm looking to get better. It's right now scored on a scale of 1 to 10. So I'm an intermediate level competitor, or I'm an intermediate, judoka, or a new black belt. And I'm looking to get better at the kata. And I keep, what should I do? Is it because my steps are too wrong? Is my hand in the right place? Did we not breathe right at the same time? And they get really focused on these details about what they think judges are looking for them.
And face direction and these things, which from a judging perspective, we would consider to be small mistakes. So maybe we could talk just generally about the the point structure for judging?
Yeah, so the current international standard for kata competition judging is the IJF kata criteria for competition. And that has a scoring system that goes from 1 to 10. And they judge you not holistically, as opposed to, I've seen your overall technique, and in my heart, I know that it is of this level. They judge it analytically. So they'll view it and they'll be watching, okay, I start you at a perfect score. And every time I see a mistake, I'm going to take off points for the mistake. And at the end, however many of those points you've managed to retain, that's your score. So it's an analytical versus a holistic scoring system. And there's 3 tiers of scores or mistakes in the IGF system. There's big mistakes, medium mistakes, and small mistakes. Pretty simple, right? There's not brain science. A big mistake is if you lose control of the technique, or the technique is just somehow fundamentally wrong in its execution. Medium mistakes are more things like a lack of realism or a lack of technical power and force that makes the technique feel and look like a judo competition technique, in a shiai. And then small techniques will be things like, I was a little too close to them. Not so close to them that it interrupted the way that the technique happened, but it interfered with the aesthetics of it. It interfered with some just the overall perfectiveness of the kata. And we always tell people, the people that we're working on, you want to really focus for your development on the medium mistakes, right? So first, learn the techniques of the kata. Know the order, know that this is, seoi nage and not ukiyo toshi, and know the difference between those in just your general execution of the judo moves. But really where you get the benefit for the training of kata, and where an intermediate level kata player can make an advancement, is on that ubiquitous scoring criteria of effectiveness and realism. And that means that when Lisa and I do it, in that moment, it looks like we're doing judo and we're not doing staged robot things. Or it means that it does look like we're doing judo together and I'm not doing something and she's doing something, happening to be close to each other. We're doing judo and judo is happening. She pinned me. I tried to escape. I used all my force and control. She shut it down. I saw an opening and I moved fluidly into the next moment. When you do that well and you understand how that works and feels, you're going to improve your kata score. And you're also going to improve your ability as a judo player. And you're also going to understand how the techniques work so that when you're a judo teacher, you can explain how that works. So there's a lot of benefits to that. And so working on that medium mistake tier and really focusing on connection and timing and effectiveness and realism is where you want to live as an intermediate level kata player who's looking to get better, or as a judoka who's doing kata for competition and promotion, and you want this to transfer into your overall judo skill. So that's easier said than done.
Yes. So how do you make your kata more realistic? Well, your techniques need to be effective. And it's easy to say, oh yeah, my Kazuri Katame was effective. He couldn't move, right? But that isn't the effect that they want, that judges want to see. That's not a benefit to your training, right? A benefit to your training is that openings that happen as the natural motion in judo happen, you can react to. All right. And
you recognize, you know how to create them, you recognize them when they're there, and you take advantage of them in an automatic and fluid way.
So one thing we see at local and regional kata competitions are katame no kata, where there's just not enough motion, like the guy's just pinned so tight that the other guy's not able to even really move or do anything. Well, from the judging perspective, now we're going to say, well, your escapes need work, right? So how do I make my escapes work? Well, we're not telling Tori to not be effective, but we are telling Tori to take a breath. Let Uke try their escape first. Don't jump all over him, because you don't know, is he going to go left or is he going to go right? So let them set up their escape and then react to it. So how can you teach your students to train like that? Well, you can have Uke win. And so when we do kata seminars, and when we do kata, especially katame no kata training in class, but this also is true for nage no kata and also true for juno kata, we take turns winning. So we would like to demonstrate what we mean by that in terms of Katame no Kata, because I think it's absolutely essential for intermediate level students who want to improve on their realism and their effectiveness to practice where both people win, so that Tori allows for Uke to do a motion that they then react to. If Uke doesn't get to do a motion, then I don't get to react, and then there's really no kata. It's just I pinned him, and that's very boring for a judge.
All right, so first we'll demonstrate a poor example, something that we see a lot in competition. Tori's going to be overbearing and not allow progression of techniques to happen. And Uke is going to move, maybe with some confusion or ambiguity about what it exactly the proper execution of the technique would be. Those are maybe, I think, the two main reasons why people fail at Katame no Kata at the intermediate levels when they're trying to get into competition. All right, so we'll skip the ceremony. Let's right here.
Is there a case?
What's that? No, just
Is there a case?
Yeah.
Okay, so a lot of times as judges or instructors, we say to the students, you need to attempt 3 escapes. That's what the kata is, attempt 3 escapes. So Rob tried to escape 3 times, but he wasn't effective in any of those ways. So how can we give him points for his effectiveness of his escapes? And that's what really happens. So Tori's thinking, I need to be effective. I need to pin that guy. He can't move at all. But Uke can't be effective. And in kata, it's really important to realize that both of us are training. Both of us are learning how to be more effective. Anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, no, I think that's true. So that was Tori being overbearing. The other reason that people are often ineffective, especially in Katame no Kata, is it's very difficult to divine what the escapes are if you're trying to do the IGF escapes. And Mickey, I think this is a good reason for your point that maybe we shouldn't all be doing those same escapes, is because if you look at the Kodokan handbook, you look at the kata judging criteria, it's not at all clear what exactly Uke is supposed to be doing from any of those documents. And if you watch the Kodokan video, it's pretty good, but I think a lot of people still don't understand because Uke tries an escape, it shuts down, you don't see the full progression, and then again and again. So the way to get around that is to really do the full progression of the techniques each time you train the kata. So we're going to train and we're going to do Kazuri no Kata. We're going to show what a training sequence for us looks like. We also use this as a training drill in the dojo for our kids and our shiai competitors without ever telling them that it's kata. Okay, so go ahead. Go 60.
And now I'll stop.
Go. Let block the second.
Oh, you want to win this?
Yeah, block.
Okay. You want to win this one now? All right, you want to stop there? So you're gonna win the third one? So I'll block the second one, you win the third. Okay, so for us as instructors and judges, we are just as focused on Uke being able to do each of those 3 escapes that he did effectively. So the first escape, and we'll talk more about these anytime we do a specific seminar. I don't want to dial into it too much, but happy to if anybody has a question. But a lot of people already know he's attacking my elbow in order to create leverage so he can roll me over. He has to practice that in order to be effective. It's not just like automatic, oh yeah, it's there, and so I'm always going to get it. And it's important that Uke practice that and practice winning. and me to resist a little bit and then a little bit more and then a little bit more. So as he gets better at that, I could start to resist more and more and more. And so that's it. That's something that we do, that we drill even when we're preparing for nationals or preparing for Pan Ams or Worlds. We're practicing him winning, me winning, him winning, because the better he gets, the better I can be. And if and this is very good for this is very much a judo concept of mutual benefit, right? I need to help him be as good as he can be for me to be to meet my potential as well.
Yeah. And just as a note, when we teach people kata, we know that nage no kata is the first one required for promotion most of the time, but we teach katame no kata first when we have the choice to, because it's very easy to show that connection between uke and tori, what it means for the techniques to be connected, what it means for tori and uke both to be getting something out of the practice. And then when you switch to nage no kata, that interrelationship is still there, but it's a lot more subtle. It's about how uke is advancing and pushing. And then I pushed this way and this much in the first set, but I pushed slightly differently in the second set, and then I responded. It's a lot more subtle than it is here. I think it's harder for people to understand, especially intermediates coming up, where the connection is and how tori and uke are supposed to relate to each other in some ways.
The action reaction is very, very clear in katame, and it builds a foundation that people can then use in Juno kata and nage no kata and all the other kata.
Yeah. So that's our general point about kata and how you kata. It really is just a training method and technique that improves your judo. Once you're able to do the different escapes and you understand, I'm really trying to escape and she's really stopping me. And same thing when you get into nage no kata. I'm advancing, they're really throwing me. They're taking advantage of that moment. As Brad said at the beginning, you know, I've done a lot of static drills. Now I understand what it means to feel that moment for the throw while in motion. And when you practice kata in that way, you both improve your judo for sport and you get into that realm where you're improving for competition. The medium mistake that everybody gets in every technique, which is realism, you know, the realism of the technique.
Flow, yes.
Close to being out of time, so we've had our major point there. Anybody have any other questions they want to jump in or comments, and then we'll close out here for today, and then hopefully have another chance to do this again. Brad, you want to come back over in case there's any questions or things? Mickey, I see your comment that you really like the blue and the white gi and the contrast between them. Clearly, we stole that from Sensei Edwin, your brother. That was his idea, and we like it quite a lot. So we decided to model it here. Your uncle. So we decided to model that.
Yes,
here.
I absolutely like Ed. I love Edwin's idea for that. And if I could do every competition in blue and white, I would. But for demonstration purposes, there's really good. Yeah.
The contrast helps people understand the action.
Okay, are there any additional questions?
Yeah, I do have some very distinguished kata practitioners on the chat too. So I would even go so far to say any comments or anything people want to go in as maybe as the format of a more of a roundtable discussion.
Well, everybody's kind of muted. Everybody's muted, I
Mickey,
think.
it says, what does it say? Can
Oh,
you
yeah,
unmute me?
Are you in South Carolina now?
Yep. Yes, I am.
Oh.
So, this is not something that I think this was initially why we were going to talk. We were actually going to talk about the kind of state of judo and Rob and I's goal of building structure for judo schools and putting high-level competitors when they're done competing into the role of the head instructor because that's what they've trained for so long. And part of the thing that we'd love to see in our community is retaining all that knowledge and work that judoka that have been as successful as Brad, then move on and be able to give it up to other students. And some of the things that really hamper that are that judoka don't tend to have any kind of business education. They may not know anything about marketing, and they may not. They definitely don't have the capital for something like that because they spent all their capital competing.
Yeah, chasing those points in the
Right.
international competition.
So we're trying to develop a model that where we can set up good, successful judo businesses and find high-level competitors that will take over that business. You know, be our head instructor, and we can, you know, kind of, you know, I have an MBA in business. Rob is a director of education. So between the two of us, we're trying to build this model that we can kind of flush out to as you know, to the community at large. And Brad is our guinea pig.
Head instructor, head judo
guinea pig.
coach, and technical advisor.
He's the brave one, yes.
But the short answer, yeah, Brad moved down here about a year ago, and he's been working with us for a year. He teaches most of the judo classes down here, and we assist, and it's been wonderful.
I have a question that I'd like to pose to you. Lisa, you brought up the idea of courage, nationally and internationally. I'd like to know the most difficult experience you had in summoning the courage to move forward with your competition.
Oh, I got that one. Oh, yeah.
I think we're probably thinking the same one, but we're curious. You go
The
ahead.
T-shirt incident.
No, that's one. Go ahead. Yeah.
Can I share that one?
Yeah, go ahead.
Because I don't. Okay. All right. So we were in.
But that was more reactive. That wasn't so much of having courage.
That was definitely courage.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, maybe I'll share mine, and then Rob can share his. I'll listen to Rob. So we were in Malta.
Throw me under the bus here.
Yeah, that's why I had to ask his permission. We were in Malta competing, and we were the first team to go out. We were doing Kata, and we were the first team of the day. And they switched the schedule on us. They moved us up a half hour. And so that added a little bit of angst because
well, we were just getting ready to start our warm up for the morning, our final warm up, and all of a sudden you hear your name come up over the PA system. You know, USA, Capriotta-Rob Gouthro. You're like, whoa!
So we got a little bit of jitters, and we heard, you know, okay, it's fine, everything's fine. You go walk down. It's also hard when you have the in high level kata competitions, when you have the opening slot, it's very difficult to do well. It's very, very difficult because, well, the better teams are seeded later, and the scores tend to improve throughout the day. It's like just a natural human nature sort of thing. So it's tough when you pull the first slot. That's not a good. That's not considered a good draw. So we got the first slot, but that's okay. Overcoming hardship, blah, blah, blah. And we rushed down there because they moved us up 30 minutes. And we get onto the mat and we walk out for our bow and we do our initial bow. And someone stands up and says,
the central judge stands up and says, wait. And he goes,
points to his shirt. And Rob still had his T-shirt on.
As I do now, because that's how I like to practice.
Because when you're warming up, so he basically had his warm-up gear still on. So this is very unusual. For whatever reason, the judges told us to exit the mat. He took off his shirt and we went back on. That never happens because we had already started our bowing. So I think nowadays they would have just docked him for the points and never stopped us, but they stopped us. So we get off. He takes his shirt. He's like, oh no, you know, we both have that. It's okay, chill moment. And then we go back out and restarting it. We're the only people on the mat. We had just made a super flub. That to me took a lot of mental focus to get over.
And courage, yes.
A very nice kata after
and then
that.
we did a very nice kata.
That was a lot. I'm going to tell a slightly different story. Not really. All of that is true, by the way. So two competitions stick out in my mind when I think about difficult moments of having to get out there. One of them was when we competed in Cancun at the World Kata Championship, and Lisa and I actually qualified for the finals. And so there's a two-stage competition. And usually, you know, U.S. teams, you know, there's a lot of expertise in the world in kata. And the US teams don't typically make it to the finals. And that year, a couple of us did, but that was the first time since the IGF had taken over the competition that a US team had made it to the finals. So typically we go, we compete, and then we go take our stuff off, relax, eat lunch, and come back and watch a good show afterwards. But that second phase of having to get ready, we're one of the first US teams out there to ever compete in this new IGF format to get out there in the finals. There's all this pressure on us. So that was a lot to work through. But another moment that also stands out was the very first time we competed judo kata at a local competition. And we had been practicing it for about 2 weeks. And we were pretty sure we could get through the correct order of the techniques. And I was so nervous when we went out there. And it was actually difficult to the point that I forgot what my next technique was supposed to be in the middle of the kata. We stood there looking at each other. We were not going to give up on this for about 45 seconds where my brain whirred trying to remember what to do next.
Well, that, and we were kind of giving each other hints. Is it this? Is it that? Is it that? And I think at the time, Karen Wilden was the head judge. And we talked to her afterwards. She said, yeah, there were about 5 or 6 times when I thought I was going to stand up and stop you guys. But right when I was, you figured it out.
And we didn't do the wrong technique. But my stress level for those 2 competitions at the Worlds and at that local kata competition, in some ways it was similar. And I like to remember that when I'm pushing people to get out there for a competition, because something that's new or scary or difficult or a new level of stress, it's new, scary, and difficult, a new level of stress, whatever level you're at in your career. And it's the same physiological and psychological stress reaction for the person. And so it's important that we remember that and that we prepare and support our local players that are getting into something that might be new for them.
Because the first time only happens once.
Yeah.
The second time is way less stressful.
Yeah, so that's why I compare those two. And I think as a teacher now and a coach who sits on the other end, I try to remember that about why people might not take that first step to get out there. And also the benefit that they get, because every time you go through that stressful scenario, whether it's at the Worlds or your first competition at a local level, whether it's kata or shiai or anything, it's a growth experience that's profoundly important. And that's part of the value of this as well. So
Excellent.
that's my story.
And Brad, what is your story?
So my first big competition was the Paris Grand Slam. And I wasn't really as afraid as more of just in awe, because I was the first mat on the first match against the number 1 person in the world from Japan, Numa. And I just remember walking out there and I'm looking over like, oh, that's the best guy in the world right there. I looked up and that's like right as the camera for the Jumbotron comes up. Everybody's about to see me like, go for a ride probably. Like, I'm already pretty sure it's like, this is the guy from Japan. Like, so I kind of got over being like afraid or like feeling like I needed to like, refocus and be courageous to like step out there and compete, because that felt like just one of the highest level things you could do. It's like, oh, you're the first match. This is like going out to like the finals. Like it's just you and the world champion out there for a second, and everybody's watching because everyone's like, oh yeah, I want to see the world champion fight. Like, so there's tons of people watching that match. The toughest, most courageous moments for me was in these training camps where basically you're getting your hands on the best guys in the world. And when you go and do this for 3 or 4 days, with the way competitive training is, you do grip fighting so extremely to the extent where you're just like destroying your hand and you get hard to grab. And I remember particularly this one time in Germany where my hands hurt so much, it was almost unbearable. Like I couldn't sleep. I was literally waking up in the middle of the night, taping my fingers so there would be some like pressure on my hands, so I wouldn't feel the pulsing pain in my fingers. And then I would wake up, an hour and a half early before training just to put my hands in hot water, like and dull the pain that way. And knowing, okay, my hands are probably going to be good for about 2 matches. And then every single guy after that, if like they're even a little fresh, I'm gonna just be slapping at them with basically useless mitts, like just trying to like find somewhere I can kind of lean or pull them in, while he's gonna be creating space, yanking my hands down, shaking the crap at me, probably doing a soda or something. And it's like, even if I can get my hands on him, he's gonna break my sleeve right away. And just accepting that and saying, well, this is what training is. This is good for me in the long run, just figuring out and feeling and seeing how these guys move and just getting used to them, because a lot of a part of the thing in the bigger scope of competition is figuring out the people that you're going to fight in your division and kind of seeing what throws they use. And just, the first time you do put your hands on them, it's not as jarring as it is if it's like, okay, you've never touched them before. So yeah, just being in those training camps and just knowing, oh no, like my hands aren't really working right now. Well, I booked six more rounds for the rest of the day, and I know the guys I just grabbed are murderers, and you're like, well, this is going to be awful. I'm probably going to get smashed all over this mat, but this is judo, and you bow in and you get to it.
Excellent. I'll take the liberty of sharing mine.
Great.
I had the opportunity to participate in the Olympics and the World Championships, and they were not nearly as frightening as in 1963, when Hayward Dishioka and I were selected to perform Nage no Kata at the All Japan Championships. So we were special research students. And every Saturday at the Kodokan, all of the High Dan would meet with a select group of students to teach them all of the katas. So we were going to perform and did perform the Nage no Kata. But what happened was that I talked to Hayward about this later, we didn't have a clue about the magnitude of what the All Japan Championship would be like at the Budokan in Tokyo. As our names were called, we walked out. There were 30,000 people there. The Emperor and Empress of Japan are in the audience. And we're supposed to get up on this mat, which is elevated, and do this thing called the kata. And I distinctly remember thinking, if Hayward and I make a mistake, we are going to suffer greatly at the dojos for having done that mistake. And overcoming that horrible feeling of horror was momentous. But once we got up on the stage and bowed in, it went very smoothly. But I had this sinking feeling in my gut that I was going to die if I made a mistake. No doubt about it.
Yeah.
Yes.
I've seen black and white photos of that. Was that filmed?
Yes, actually was filmed.
Is there that on YouTube or anything somewhere?
I don't think the whole thing is on YouTube. I'll have to check. I may have a copy of it.
I'd love to see that.
Okay, I'll see
As well.
Yeah.
if I can find it.
There's that very famous photo of the Uranage from that demonstration.
And we promise we won't.
Okay. Are there any more questions? No. Well, I want to thank the three of you very much for your commentary and your excellent presentations and for all the work you're doing to contribute to judo. And I particularly like the fact that you're enlisting the younger athletes to come into the dojo so that they can actually have a future in judo. I think that's very important, and it's something that has not existed nationwide in this country. Most of our outstanding athletes have to go earn a living doing something else, and the result is we lose a tremendous amount of talent. So I think that what you're doing is a model for American judo development. And I appreciate all of the work you've done. It's an honor to have you on the program, and we look forward to your series. Could you, Lisa, one more time explain the series you're going to put on?
Backward if I put it up. I don't know.
There you go.
Oh, it's backward. Okay, sorry. So we're gonna do a monthly seminar that'll dual format. So we'll have some groups can come in person. Down in South Carolina, we are open, so we are lucky to be able to do that. So people from the North Carolina, Georgia, maybe as far as Virginia and Florida area are invited, and this is open nationally. And there'll also be a Zoom participation. So if you and a partner want to meet at, like, if you wanted the dojo to participate, or even practicing in your living room, Rob and I we trained for nationals and Pan Ams in our living room when we first started, just because we practiced every day and the dojo wasn't open every day. So what we'll do, will be open, an open enough format that individuals can practice with a gi, like an empty gi, or a dummy, that pairs can practice in their living room, or groups can practice at their dojo, and then if otherwise they can come in person. We're going to do it. It's for the most part, it's the first Sunday of every month, and we're going to try and go through the 5 primary kata that the IJF competes in. And the order is going to be Katame no Kata, Nage no Kata, Kodokan Goshin Jitsu, Kimi no Kata, and then Ju no Kata, with the exception of April. The first Sunday is Easter. And I would probably still be doing judo, but probably some other people might want to take that day off to eat. So we're going to switch that one to be April 11th. But I am trying to get that information spread out. So any assistance in disseminating is greatly appreciated. I know Shufu already put it on their website. I'm trying to get it on USA Judo's website.
So go to charlestonselfdefense.com. First one is February 7th.
February 7th.
Okay. Well, thank you all very much for participating. We look forward to your program, and stay safe, wear a mask, and be happy.
Thank you,
Take care.
Sensei.
Thank you so
It
much
was
for
an honor and a
having us.
privilege.
It was
Thank you.
absolutely an
Thank
honor.
you.